My dad took me to Bowman Gray Stadium when I was about 7 years old. Walking through the gate at the top of the hill and seeing the cars on the track and the smell and the noise, I knew from then on I was hooked.
We were living in Ohio. Well, my boy, as he was 6 or 7 years old, we were having a talk about how it was important, school was important, about doing what you wanted to do in life. Whatever you want to do when you're a kid, you need to try to do that as an adult. Give it a shot. He asked me what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I said I wanted to work on race cars. And he said, so why aren't you working on race cars? And it just, I had no answer for that. So at that point, within 3 months, I sold most everything I owned. I packed up and moved to North Carolina.
In 1969, I was working at a gas station. I heard an engine running near a friend of mine's house, a race engine, and I was very interested in it. So I went over and met the guy, asked him if he needed any help. The next thing I know, I'm quitting my job at the gas station and taking a job full-time at a race shop for $50 a week. We were winning races at the highest level of the local short track, and I always thought that's what I want, is to win at the top.
In 1976, I started going to Winston Cup in Atlanta. All the cars flying around in circles, and I said, dang, man, I'd like to be out there on that pit crew, you know, working with them. And
when I really got hooked on it, it was probably about 1987. Scott Pruitt took the pole in a Trans Am race at Brainerd, and he was sponsored by Budget. When he came up for the morning warm-up, the car said fudge on it, and as a kid, I liked chocolate. Ever since then, Scott Pruitt's been my hero.
Dad would come in, grab me up, and we'd take off to the garage, and we'd work really late, and I was just a little guy, and we'd get back home, and before I could go in the house, I'd have to take all my clothes off, and he would get the garden hose out, and he would wet me down, and he'd go in there and get these Oxidol or Tide powders or something, and scrub me down with these powders before I could go in the house and take a bath. That's how bad dirty I would get working on Dad's cars.
Probably one of the biggest memories that stood out for me, I wasn't behind the wheel, but I was in a race car. I was in a right seat. My father was driving a race car that I actually had to drive to and from school, and I raced it on the weekends. So obviously I was a bit nervous when my father got behind the wheel and showed me it could go faster than I was ready for. And probably from that moment forward, I was hooked.
My parents brought me home from the hospital when I was born in a Porsche 356 Speedster. So that was my introduction to sports car racing, or at least sports cars.
My dad, a car was a pure A to B device for him, so it was, I felt a bit more passion than that. And then ultimately racing proved to be very expensive, and I wasn't in a position to fund that, so I then started designing race cars and parts of race cars, and I seemed to have a knack for making other people's race cars go faster than my own one.
Heard about the 12 hours of Sebring, decided to go, went, got hooked on racing.
Senior year of high school, when the guidance counselor asked me what I wanted to do, kids are dreamers, I was a dreamer, and I told him I wanted to work on race cars. It'd probably be a dream job. It'd be the most fun thing I could possibly do. And he looked around the room and kind of thought about it for a second, and he looked back at me and he said, well, what do you really want to do? And I walked out of his office.
Having grown up around racing with my father, it was always something that was in my blood, but it's more about the competition element that really drives me forward.
Well, it must have been when I was 7 or 8 years old that I saw my very first race. Every July 4th in my hometown of Cedar Rapids, they'd bring in the IMCA big cars. But the first time I saw them throw those cars sideways into turn one on that banked dirt track at Hawkeye Downs in Cedar Rapids, I was hooked. From then on, if there was ever a race, I was there.
But I grew up racing at Lime Rock in go-karts. It progressed into cars where my father was racing in SCCA against Eric Curran, ironically. That really is just kind of my home away from home. I love being at the track.
It all started when my grandfather took me to my first actual race event at Watkins Glen International when I was 7 years old back in '98. Once I heard the cars on the track, smelled the race fuel, smelled the rubber, I was like, man, I want to do this later on in life. When I grow up, I want to be involved somehow in racing.
You could take an office job, but you can never get the passion that you see from the people I work with, from the top, where the knowledge base comes, to the youngsters who have joined and their passion that fires what we're doing. So you never, ever stop enjoying this.
Race day morning is always the best morning of the weekend.
I look at race day as like Christmas Day every day.
I love it.
The feeling, it's indescribable, the feeling of race day. It's a magical feeling.
In the movie Days of Thunder, when the movie first starts and you see the sun come up and you see the birds begin to fly and then the fans start to filter in and you start to hear the cars' engines run, that's really what race day is like, that it's a constant slow build to the crescendo of the race actually starting.
Beginning of the race, there's the parade with all the cars walking through, and it's otherworldly, really, you know, having all these people that, you know, they work a 9-to-5 job and then they come out in their free time to see you do your job.
There's a real high level of pride in the way the car is presented also, you know, just the way that it looks. So you want to perform just as well as you look also.
The sound of the engines, the smell of the rubber, you can't beat it.
The crowd's all out there and the cars are starting up in the morning. It is a thrill that no one can understand unless they're there to see it.
It's so cerebral, like everything about going to the racetrack, like especially back when it was, you know, leaded high octane fuel, like it goes in your nose and straight to the back of your brain, and you're just there and you can't help but focus on what's going on in that moment.
Once that helmet goes on, it's complete game time, focus on the car, focus what's going on, and just like ready to win.
But it's like once the national anthem starts, it's like once you put your hat back on, radio checks are done, it's like that's it. It's game time at that point.
Start your engines is, for me, is crazy.
And there's a lot of butterflies that turn, and even after all these years, you still get a little bit of anxiety and you get excited, and you know, you're waiting for the green flag.
Just the actual green flag moment, you know, it's like turn one, you know, is there going to be a big, you know, incident? Is there not? Everybody going to get through safe?
Racing is, for me, is amazing because the 1 millisecond is very important for the final result.
I mean, there's always that competition that always drives you, that you want to be the best.
The coolest thing is something that you work on and you can take it and you can beat other people. It's the competitiveness, you know. You win a championship, you're the best, and so that's what makes it really cool, and you strive to do that.
Everybody will agree that winning is sort of the main motivation. There's nothing like that feeling when you pull something together into an achievement and pull off a win.
Losing sucks. Second is the worst, man. I'll tell you what. And when we can take 1-2, we didn't lose that day, and that's outstanding. We've been able to do that on the podium of the season championships, and that's that pretty much makes a mark.
If you can go out there and you can beat those guys, you know, it's the coolest feeling in the world.